Did you know that just mastering a few grammatical structures could be the key to passing your English C1 exam? If you ever feel lost or unsure on what grammatical structures you need to use in your C1 level, or perhaps you never know how to use them in your speaking exams, monologues and dialogues, this video is for you. I'm so glad you joined me. Today we are breaking down the first 3 grammatical structures that will not only help you stand out from the crowd in your speaking exams, but will also give you the confidence you need in the rest of the tests. So this is part 1 of a series of videos that I'm creating to explore all the different grammatical structures that you need for your C1 level exam. So please stay with me till the end of this video because I have something really cool to show you. So come with me, I'm going to show you the first 3 grammatical structures, and for that I need my computer. Let's begin with the first 3 grammatical structures you need for your C1. In the first place, well, here you have all the different structures that we'll be dealing with in the next series of videos that are coming up in the channel. But today I want to begin with the structure of used to and would. Now, these 2 structures are used when we're talking about the past, and especially when we talk about past actions and past states that no longer happen nowadays. So whenever you have to talk about a past action in the past or a past state that is no longer true nowadays, you can use used to and would. But there is a slight difference, and let me show you what it is. Used to for me is like the wild card. Anything because used to can be used for past actions and past states that no longer happen today. So it doesn't matter if it's an action, it doesn't matter if it's a state, used to will always be correct. So, however, if you want to go the extra mile and really impress your examiners in your exams, I would highly recommend that if you are talking about past actions that no longer happen nowadays, go for would, yeah, because it will really make a difference, and it's a little bit more complex than used to. Okay, let me show you some examples. So as you can see on the screen, you have, well, when I was a child, I used to be happy all the time. Now, if you look at it, if you look at the verb to be happy, okay, we're talking about a state, yeah, because to be happy is not an action, it doesn't require movement, so we're talking about a state. So whenever you're talking about states, you can only use used to, okay? So this is the only correct answer, okay? I used to be happy all the time. Now, what happens when we have an action verb? Well, you can actually use both. You can use used to and also would. For example, you can say 20 years ago, my friend and I used to have breakfast together every Sunday. Because this was an action that happened repeatedly in the past, I can use used to, but also I can use would if I wanted to. So I could say, I would have breakfast together every Sunday, yeah? So you can see the next example. When I was a little boy, I would meet my cousins every Sunday. It's a shame we are no longer in contact. So again, to meet is an action verb, okay? It requires movement, okay? It can go in the continuous form. So because it's an action verb, I can use would if I wanted to, although used to would also be correct. Yeah, so remember, for action, repeated actions in the past, I can use both of them. However, if it's a past state, only used to. But what happens in your exams? When you have to face a speaking exam, your monologues or your dialogues, it's quite difficult to come up with grammatical structures. We forget completely about all the grammar that we've been studying all these years. So for this reason, I have prepared a couple of examples so that I can show you exactly how you can use these grammatical structures in some of your monologues and your dialogues as well. Okay, so the first example, it's an education monologue. So you could say something like, well, in the past, education systems used to be focused primarily on memorization, but now there is a greater emphasis on critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Now, because to be focused is a state verb, then it's okay to use used to. And when you have to talk about education, I think it's the perfect opportunity to use, for example, structures like used to or would. Why? Because you normally have to contrast, you normally have to compare, for example, the traditional teaching styles in the past, the modern teaching styles nowadays, for example, with the arrival of artificial intelligence, for example. So when you have to make contrast between present and past, think about and remember that used to and would can really save your day. Now imagine you have a dialogue this time, but also regarding education. Perhaps you have to describe to your classmate what was your routine in high school or your routine studies, etc. You could say something like, well, during my high school years, we would often participate in debate clubs and public speaking contests. which greatly enhanced our communication skills. Now, because participate is an action verb, okay, that's why I can use would instead of used to, although used to would be also correct, but because I want to get extra points, then I can use the structure with would. So remember that would is an excellent choice when you have to talk about past actions that no longer happen nowadays, and if you have to face a dialogue regarding education, for example, you can say something like this. And now remember that in the channel, there is a complete video where I explain and clarify all the differences between the structures used to and would. So go and check it out. You can also scan the QR code on the screen. Now let's move on to the next amazing grammatical structure that is great for your C1 level. And this is one of my favorite ones. And we are talking about the cleft sentences. Now, cleft sentences, in case you don't know them, it's a way to add emphasis to something that we are discussing, okay? So basically, we are dividing a sentence into two parts, and then we are placing our emphasis on one of the parts. Now, by the way, the word cleft comes from the verb to cleave, which means a part divided into two parts. That's why they're called cleft sentences. And cleft sentences are divided into two different groups. You can have the sentences that begin with it, and also the sentences that begin with a WH word, for example, what, when, where, etc. Let's take a look at them. Now, the first group, the it cleft sentences, okay, they begin, of course, with the word it, but it can go in different verb tenses. You can have it is, or you can have it was, for example, in the present or in the past mainly, followed by the emphasized element. So whatever you want to emphasize from the sentence, it follows that it is or it was, and after the emphasized element you finally have a relative clause, depending if it's a person or a place or an object, etc. So let's take a look at an example to understand it better. So say that you wanted to say, well, John completed the project. Okay, this is a normal, neutral, standard sentence with no emphasis anywhere. However, imagine that someone told you, well, John didn't complete the project, Susan did, and you want to contradict that idea, okay? You want to make sure that it was John and not Susan who completed the project. For that, cleft sentences come in really handy, because you can say, well, it was John who completed the project, okay? So you're making sure that the emphasis is on John and no one else, and that was the person who completed the project. Now, if you look at it if you look at the formation of this sentence, it was at the very beginning, then you have the element of emphasis, which is John in this case, and then you have a relative clause beginning with who, because of course John is a person, that's why we say John who completed the project. So again, the emphasis is on John. Now, of course, with a WH cleft, what comes at the beginning of a sentence is a WH word. So, for example, what, or where, or when, or which, etc. So, for example, imagine you want to say, okay, I need a holiday. This is a normal sentence. There's not really emphasis right there. But of course, if you really want to make sure that you really want it, you really want to make it sound strong and convincing, then you would say, what I need is a holiday, okay? Not only are you placing the emphasis on holiday and how much you really need the holiday, but also you creating this type of suspense and mystery, because people don't know what you're going to say after that. What I need, and then people might say, oh, what do you need? What is that? So you are creating a kind of mystery, yeah, not anticipating what is your need. So if you look at the formation, you have the WH word, for example, what, and then you have the clause, yeah, how you finish the normal sentence. So what I need is a holiday. Lo que necesito es unas vacaciones, ¿vale? So the emphasis is on holiday, but you really make sure and you're really specifying that you really, really, really want it now. Let's talk about speaking exams. For example, let's say that you have to do a monologue regarding the environment, which is such a typical question in your speaking exams. Okay, you could say something like, okay, we need to reduce carbon emissions to save the planet. That is a normal, no emphatic way of saying or giving information about the environment. However, if you want to sound more convincing, more attractive, more persuading, you can say what will save the planet is, and then people are thinking, oh, what is that? Okay, I wonder what it is. You know, you are creating this kind of suspense. Okay, so what will save the planet is the collective effort to reduce carbon emissions. So you are placing the WH word, what, at the beginning, and then you continue in the sentence. Now, let's take, for example, that you have to do a health monologue, all right? You can say, it is regular exercise that keeps you healthy. Imagine that you have to write an essay or you have to do a monologue about health, and then you have to defend the idea that regular exercise is the most important factor in order to have health. Then you can use, okay, it is regular exercise, yeah, that keeps you healthy. So it's not waking up early, it's not having a balanced diet, it's not having regular checkups to your doctor, it's actually regular exercise. So again, the emphasis is on that element. And finally, if you're having a dialogue regarding work, for example, and you have to speak to your workmate, maybe that person has asked you, okay, and why did you apply for that job? Because you are talking about a new position that you're going to take. You can say, well, what motivated me to apply for the position was, and again, the mystery is there, your classmate doesn't know what you're going to say, so you are keeping the other person really interested in what you have to say. So what motivated me to apply for the position was the opportunity for growth. So again, you're using a WH Cleft sentence in order to place emphasis and sound a little bit more interesting and a little bit more intriguing. And remember that in my channel as well, there is a whole video on the explanation of Cleft sentences. So take a look, scan the code on the screen, or I will leave the link down there in the description below for you to watch it. And the next grammatical structure that we're going to see today is the passive voice, right? So number one, when do we need... I'm sorry, if you hear some sounds in the background, it's actually my dog who is snoring a little bit, having a little siesta. So I'm sorry if you can hear the noise. Anyway, let's carry on with important stuff. Okay, so passives. When do we use passive in English? Well, passive actually is much more common in English than in Spanish. And we use passive, or the passive voice, for several reasons. Basically, to change the focus of the sentence, okay? We want to change and put the importance on a different element, yeah, to the standard one. So whenever, for example, we don't want to mention who did something, or perhaps when we don't know who did something, or perhaps it's obvious who did something and we don't need to mention that person, then the passive voice is perfect for those situations. Also, when the person who did something is people in general and you don't want to say people in general did blah, 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 this is the perfect situation to use the passive as well. And finally, the passive voice is usually used in more formal language, more scientific language, okay? So if you want to sound a bit more formal, then passive is the way to go. So if you look at the examples on the screen, you have, well, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. In this case, we are using the passive because the focus or the importance is actually that this person was assassinated, and we don't want to give the importance on the killer because obviously he was such a mean person. So the important thing is that this guy was killed, and that's why I'm choosing the passive, because I want all the focus to go to Kennedy, all right? Then, for example, when you say it is believed that the crime rate will increase in the next few years, okay, se cree, se piensa, then we are not really interested in saying who believes that, or perhaps because really it's people in general, so it's not very interesting. So we can simply say, well, it is believed, and we just simply use a passive in this case, okay? We're going to see the different types of passives, because first, we're going to concentrate on the normal standard personal passives, which is, I'm sure you know them already. And basically, this is the formation. This is how we do, or we form a passive sentence. So passives. When do we use passive in English? Well, passive actually is much more common in English than in Spanish. And we use passive, or the passive voice, for several reasons. Basically, to change the focus of the sentence, okay? We want to change and put the importance on a different element, yeah, to the standard one. So whenever, for example, we don't want to mention who did something, or perhaps when we don't know who did something, or perhaps it's obvious who did something and we don't need to mention that person, then the passive voice it's perfect for those situations. Also, when the person who did something is people in general, and you don't want to say people in general did blah, 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 this is the perfect situation to use the passive as well. And finally, the passive voice is usually used in more formal language, more scientific language, okay? So if you want to sound a bit more formal, then passive is the way to go. So if you look at the examples on the screen, you have, well, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. In this case, we are using the passive because the focus or the importance is actually that this person was assassinated, and we don't want to give the importance on the killer because obviously he was such a mean person. So the important thing is that this guy was killed, and that's why I'm choosing the passive, because I want all the focus to go to Kennedy. All right. Then, for example, when you say it is believed that the crime rate will increase in the next few years, okay, se cree, se piensa, then we are not really interested in saying who believes that, or perhaps because really it's people in general, so it's not very interesting. So we can simply say, well, it is believed, and we just simply use a passive in this case, okay? We're gonna see the different types of passives, because first we're gonna concentrate on the normal standard personal passives, which is, I'm sure you know them already. And basically, this is the formation. This is how we do, or we form a passive sentence. First, you have to take the sentence in the active voice, the normal voice. Okay, for example, the cat chased the mouse, and you have to identify the subject. Okay, in this case, the subject is the cat. Okay, the person or the animal who does the action. Then number two, we need to find the object in the active voice. Okay, in the active sentence. Okay, and then it will become the subject of our passive sentence. So for example, the mouse is the object in the active sentence, so the mouse will be my subject in the passive voice sentence. So my passive sentence will begin with the mouse, blah, blah, blah. Now, the next step is we need to look at the verb, right? So the main verb of the active sentence, we need to know what verb tense does it have, because then we need to find the equivalent and use the verb to be in that exact verb tense. So for example, in the active sentence, the cat chased the mouse, the verb is in the past simple, chased. That's why I need to use the verb to be in the past simple. Forget about chased, and then I'm going to use the verb to be in the past for the third person singular because it's the mouse, and I'm going to say was, okay? Because was is the past simple of the verb to be, okay? So that is my third step to doing a passive sentence. And then after the verb to be, I'm going to attach the past participle of the main verb in the active sentence. So because the main verb was to chase, I'm going to put chased, because it's a regular verb, right after the verb to be in the passive sentence. That's why I'm going to say the mouse was chased by the cat. And then finally, if you want, because this is only optional, you can include the agent of who did the action in the passive sentence, okay? In this case, you can introduce the agent with the preposition by. That's why we say the mouse was chased by the cat, okay? But again, the agent is absolutely optional, only if you want to and if it makes sense. So here on the screen, you can see more examples with transformation. You have an active sentence, they are building a new bridge, and then again, we repeat the same process. We take the object and it becomes the subject, a new bridge, okay, because it's the object, becomes the subject. Then I pay attention to the verb tense of the active sentence, are building, which is a present continuous. And then what I do in the passive is that I use the verb to be in the present continuous, which is being, okay? The verb to be is, and then be ending in ing, okay? Present continuous. And finally, I attach the past participle of the main verb, which is to build, in this case, build ending with a T. And if I wanted to add the agent, I would say by them, but it's not really important or relevant, so I would probably omit that part, okay? In the next example, the same thing. They will finish the project tomorrow. The project becomes the subject, and then will finish, the verb tense is future, okay? So I just use the verb to be in the future. the simple future. So will be, okay? And finally, after the verb to be, I attach the past participle, finished, because it's a regular verb, all right? So again, some examples of how we can transform the active into passives. And it's very interesting to know and to note that passives can have two types. We've just seen the personal passives, the standard passives, but also we have the impersonal passives, which are very, very common in English, and they are very, very useful. So these impersonal passives are normally, used with reporting verbs such as say, think, know, understand, believe, consider, etc. Okay? And then we use them when there is a non-specified group of people that do say or think something. So we can say, so basically it's like in Spanish, se entiende, se espera, se conoce, okay, which is a bit more neutral. There are two forms to make this impersonal passive. The first one is with that formation. It plus the verb to be, plus the past participle, and then it continues with the sentence. And finally, someone or something, followed by be, and followed by the past participle and the infinitive with to. Let's take a look at some examples. For instance, you can say, it is estimated that millions of people visit the site every year. Or it is believed that this castle dates from the 3rd century before Christ. Okay, so the formation is it is, in this case, it plus the verb to be. And then you have the participle, the past participle, in this case, estimated or believed or known or understood. And then that followed by a full clause, that millions of people, that this castle dates, etc., etc. This is the standard impersonal passive, but also you can make it a little more complex, and you can make it a little bit more complex, which is actually my favorite because it requires a little bit more effort. And then you can change it by using someone or something, followed by be, followed by the past participle, followed by the infinitive with to. So you can say, millions of people are estimated, or this castle is believed. Yeah, as you can see, you take the someone or the something, and that becomes the subject of the sentence, millions of people, and then the verb to be, are, and then the past participle, estimated, followed by the to infinitive, to visit, or in the case of the castle, to date from the 3rd century before Christ. Okay, so as you can see, two different ways of using the impersonal passive as well. And now, of course, all these structures that I'm showing you today are ideal for any type of exam, not only for your speaking exams, but also maybe for your written exams, for your essays, for your articles, etc. But one of my favorite ways of using this impersonal passive that we just saw is using them with mediation activities, with mediation exams. For example, imagine you have an infographic on 5 different ways or 5 different benefits of having cold showers, right? And you see the infographic with the different benefits, right? You can simply transmit the idea or the information by saying, well, according to the infographic, it says that blah, 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 or according to this leaflet, okay? One of the benefits is blah. But then you can always use this impersonal passive structure. So for example, you could say it's believed that cold showers enhance blood flow, for example. So you begin your sentence with an impersonal passive in order to transmit and to report the information from an infographic, and it's a different way not to always use the same ways or the same ideas or the same phrases. So try it out next time. And your exams. So when you are doing your speaking exams, for example, say that you have to face an environment monologue, you can say, well, it is believed that climate change will have severe impacts on biodiversity if immediate action is not taken. Okay, so again, it makes what you are saying kind of professional with some kind of evidence, scientific evidence in the background. So it's a really good idea to begin with an impersonal passive. And imagine that you have to deal with a health monologue. So you can say alternative medicine is considered to provide effective treatments for certain chronic conditions. So again, I am using here an impersonal passive with the second type that we just saw when you have the subject at the beginning, in this case, alternative medicine. And it's a very cool way, to introduce the information for your monologues and your oral exam. So there you have it. 3 very powerful grammatical structures to help you boost your English exams. And remember, it's not just about knowing the structures, but also knowing how to use them in your speaking exams especially. Please leave me a comment below to let me know that you are excited about watching the rest of the series. In our next video, we will dive into 3 more amazing grammatical structures to help you further boost your speaking skills. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to let you know that I'm working on a beautiful and super comprehensive ebook. It's not ready yet, but almost, and I wanted to release it at the end of the last video of this series. So please stay tuned to the channel, subscribe if you haven't done so, because if you sign up for my mailing list in the description box below, you will be the first one to receive all the details and all the information for this ebook. So please sign up now and don't miss out. I hope it was helpful, and leave me a comment if you're excited to watch the next videos. See you soon. Bye.